If you were arrested for PC 273.5A, there are 5 factors that make your case more severe. In other words, they make it more likely for the prosecution to file charges against you, which if you haven't been to court yet, they likely have not. And if they do file charges, it makes it more likely that they will file as a felony or a misdemeanor. And if these factors do not apply to you, then the opposite is true. And I'll get into that and explain it in this video. My name is Veronica. I'm a criminal defense attorney here in California, and I help people put their cases behind them so that they can enjoy their lives and their freedom. I've been doing this for about 10 years, and these are the 5 factors that I have noticed. If any of these are present, they make it more likely for the prosecution to file charges against my client. And what I mean by that is if you have been arrested for domestic violence, you went to jail, you bonded out, or maybe you got a citation, in which case it's likely a misdemeanor arrest, and you have a court date coming up. It seems like, oh my God, I have a criminal case against me, right? But that's actually not exactly true. What happens after you were arrested is the police will generate a report, but then they have to give it to the district attorney's office, and the district attorney has to look at the police report and anything else that's in your file and try to figure out, do I want to file more serious charges than what you were arrested for, less serious charges, or do I want to drop the whole thing altogether, which is possible, especially if it was your first domestic violence arrest. Okay, so let's get into these 5 factors that make it more likely that they file charges against you, and that if they do file charges, they are felony charges rather than misdemeanor. Okay, so the first factor is your criminal history. If you have criminal history, especially if it's for domestic violence, or if you've been to prison, or if you have a strike on your record, then they are much more likely to file charges against you. They're more likely to make them felony charges. Basically, they're much less likely to give you the benefit of the doubt. Now, if your criminal history is really old, or it's minor or unrelated, maybe it's a DUI that's 5 years old, for example, it hurts you a little bit, but not that much. Okay, number 2 is if there are no good things presented to the DA about you before court, then the prosecution is more likely to file charges. So what I mean by that is, okay, in general, if somebody hires me before, and it should be if they hire every attorney, although I know not every attorney does this, if you hire me before court, then part of my job, and actually the biggest part of my job at that point, is to try to get the charges dropped. And the way to do that, one of the ways, is to put together a packet that explains all of the good things about you that the prosecutor won't know, because whatever's in the police report is not going to be good for you, right? But the prosecutor will review the entire file, so that could include criminal history, lack thereof, it'll include the police report, and then if you have an attorney who submits good things on your behalf, who, for example, sends you to classes or sends you to couples therapy with your significant other, whether or not you need it, presents a character letter about you, presents character letters from your family, friends, coworkers, anybody who knows you. Basically, your side of it, when you're thinking of, I'm not a criminal, these are all the reasons why I should get a second chance, that all should be presented to the DA ahead of time. But many times people will come to me when it's already too late, they went to their first court date and charges were filed, nobody ever presented the good things about them or their side of the story, and at that point I look at the case and sometimes I'm like, this really shouldn't have been filed. If they'd hired me before court, I probably could have gotten this whole thing dropped, but unfortunately they didn't, and there's a DA sitting in an office somewhere who has a stack of hundreds of police reports and has to go through them and put them in these different piles of filing, not filing, filing misdemeanor, filing felony, right? And I really think that many times they're not looking at it that carefully, and when they see, oh, this person has an attorney, so they're going to be fighting the case, and heard the good things about them, you know what? Let's just put this in the do not file pile. I mean, that's really where you want to go, and I think that this does make a big difference. But when this does not happen, when you don't do this, then it does make it significantly more likely that they will file charges against you, and that if they file, it's going to be felony instead of misdemeanor charges. Number 3 is if there are any strangling or choking allegations, whether or not it's true, then it is more likely that they are going to file charges. I actually had a case where none of these 5 things, and I know we're only on number 3, were present except for a strangling or choking allegation, and I actually had to talk to the DA on the phone. It was during her lunch. I managed to catch her as she was reviewing this case and convince her not to file, but that was an uphill battle, because whenever there's a strangling or choking allegation, then in the DA's opinion, basically throughout throughout the state of California, it's more likely that the situation will escalate and become dangerous. And the last thing that they want to do is reject a case and then end up having a murder case where they had rejected domestic violence charges before. So whenever that is the case, it doesn't mean that it's hopeless. Like I said, it can be possible to get charges dropped before court. It can be possible to get them dropped down to misdemeanor before court and then work on getting like classes in exchange for a dismissal. But it does make it much more serious. Number 4, severe injuries. The more severe injuries that are on the other party, that are on the alleged victim, the more likely that they are going to end up filing. So if it's a red mark, then that's not really very bad. If it's a bruise, that's more significant. If it's a cut of some kind, if the person has to get stitches, if there are broken bones, whether or not that was caused by you. I'm talking about the allegations here, not what they can actually prove. The allegations, like what the alleged victim said, or if they had a bruise or they had a cut on them that the police are attributing to you, that does make it much more serious and more likely that they will file charges. Number 5 is if the victim is very against you and is contacting the DA. Okay, so this question comes up a lot, and if you are very early on in your research, then you may not know this yet. Once you are arrested, it's not up to the victim whether or not charges are filed. So you see on TV, Law and Order, they talk about pressing charges. You want to press charges. If you don't want to, then they'll drop the case. That is not how it works with domestic violence cases in California. Once you're arrested, it's out of the victim's hands. Mostly. So the victim can't cause them to drop charges. She can't cause them, or he cannot cause them to bring charges against you. But if the victim is pushing for, imagine scales. We have the scales of justice, right? And imagine that every one of these things is a weight. And if the victim is calling up the DA and saying to the DA, this is really bad, I want charges brought against this person, then they are more likely, and especially when, it starts out about 50-50, they are more likely to file charges against you. Now, if the injuries were not very severe, if you have no criminal history, if you have an attorney that is submitting this do not file packet with all the good things about you, character letters, etc. before court, then they still may not file, but that is something that can make the case worse. I hope that you found this video helpful, and by the way, this is not my normal set. If this is the first video that you're watching, usually it's a lot better, and if you do watch regularly, if you see more of my videos, the Lady Liberty sign's coming back. I'll have a much better set by the end of next week. And if you do have a criminal case in California that you need help with, feel free to give me a call. You can find my number down below. You can also find a link down there to book a consultation.